All right, hello everyone out there. Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas, and I do educational videos on many different subjects. Today we're looking at, I think, the 59th video on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. We're examining his last book that came out after he died. He died in 1990, and it's called Beyond Space and Time. Larson's reciprocal system is a theory of everything that is a system, meaning that if you understand how the system works, you can learn how to apply it yourself, and you can derive everything from it. You can do what he did, and you can derive chemistry and physics and astronomy and economics from it, or you can take it yourself and you, like me, I'm a historian, I could learn how to apply it to history. I could learn how to apply it to basketball. I could learn how to apply it to music theory. It would take some doing. I would probably have to rack my mind and, go through a long string of deductions after a long string of inductions, which is what Larson did. He first came up with the general idea in about 1930, where he was crossing the street and he had an epiphany. He was working on a couple chemistry problems having to do with the interatomic distance of certain atoms and molecules. And he had a voice or a feeling that told him, why don't you just assume, for the sake of this problem, that space and time are reciprocals of each other? And he almost fell over in the street, but by the time he got home, he remembered that, and he attempted to apply it to his the problem that he was working on, and the answer popped out. And then later he was working on another problem, and he was like, why don't I try that space and time being reciprocals assumption again? And the answer popped out. And he did it a few more times, and then he was like, I think I should make a general study of this. And it took him about 20 years, but eventually he came up with his first fundamental postulate, two fundamental postulates, the first of which is by far more important. And the gist of it is that the universe is not made out of matter, and the universe is not made out of energy, but the universe is made out of motion. And in particular, something that's called scalar motion, a motion that has a magnitude but no direction, and which can be mapped by using a balloon and some magic markers, putting dots on the balloon, blowing up the balloon. Those dots manifest a scalar motion. They're moving away from each other when you blow up the balloon, but not in any particular direction or in all directions. So the universe is made out of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time. That motion, as well as space and time, are in 3 dimensions, although I would say 3 or 4 dimensions, using the cube as an example, the star tetrahedron cube. And they are in discrete units, meaning that there is a minimum unit of space and there is a minimum unit of time. And in fact, 1 unit of space per 1 unit of time is the speed of light. And so whereas in Einstein's system, the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, in Larson's system, the speed of light is actually the midpoint of the universe, or the neutral point of the universe. If we theoretically were to meditate and get ourselves into the most silent, quiet spot that we could total stillness, that would be the speed of light. And so the speed of light is the midpoint of the universe, and half of the universe is moving faster than the speed of light, and half of it is moving slower than the speed of light. The half that we recognize as moving slower is the material sector, what he calls sector 1. And this is chemistry and, the other physical universe that you're familiar with, atoms and molecules. But as atoms and molecules aggregate together, they become more and more complex. And when physical aggregates get to their most complex, that is the DNA molecule that contains several billion atoms per molecule. At that point, and not before that, but at that point, the DNA molecule becomes subject to a sector 2 component. And the sector 2 is the half of the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light. Larson calls that the cosmic sector, or sector 2. And when the cosmic sector, or the control unit, comes into control over the sector 1 unit, that creates what Larson calls the life unit. And so life is a combination of a material and a cosmic sector entity. He goes further and says that as life moves toward its most complex, which he says is the intelligent human being, then it also can become subject to control over by sector 3. And sector 3 is the generalized region that is not really part of the universe, or not independent of the universe, independent of space and time. And he refers to this as sector 3. Most people would refer to it as God or the spirit world. And its control unit is targeted toward ethical behavior, whereas life is targeted toward survival. And so at some points, these work together, and sometimes they work opposite. And at that point, the human being has to decide whose input to go by, sector 2 or sector 3. So that's kind of the gist of it. Now, in his final book, we're talking about Beyond Space and Time. We're talking about how all of this life unit and sector 3, how all of these things affect human beings. And he had just done a few chapters here on communication from sector 3, which is variously known as ESP, or intuition, or scientific insight, or religious revelation. Those are all communications from sector 3. Then he backs up and he talks about emotions, and then he talks about this chapter here, which we're on, which is called Thinking and Memory. And, those are both sector 2, but they have sector 3 implications, because thinking is the necessary prerequisite that is needed for sector 3, for sector 2 or life unit to be eligible for sector 3 control. And so now he's talking about dreaming and sleeping. And he says that both the thinking and the memory are not capable of continuous operation, because they get out of sync with the material unit. The material unit is based on clock time, which is the scalar motion, which is the progression of time that we're familiar with. But in the cosmic sector, time and space are inverted. So sector 1's relations are really more like space over time relations, whereas sector 2 relations are more like time over space relations. And so when you cross the speed of light, you have to invert the roles of space and time. And so basically in this sector 2, you don't have scalar time. You don't have the progression of time. Instead, you have this three-dimensional time that's based on Euclidean geometry, in the same way that space is based on three-dimensional, I say three or four, but three-dimensional time in space. So that kind of time doesn't follow the progression of time. It's different. And so as a result, the sector 2 component eventually gets out of sync with the sector 1 component and has to be basically disconnected and rewound to get back into the proper synchronization with time. And this rewinding is a variable process, meaning that memory and thinking rewind at basically different rates, or memory doesn't need as much rewinding as thinking does because memory is simpler. And so when you're rewinding both space and time, then you have sleep, really what he calls non-REM sleep. But when the memory gets done rewinding, but the thinking still has to continue rewinding, then you have dreaming, REM sleep. And so that's kind of where he is right now. We're going to pick up here in chapter 14. The last thing that he was talking about is basically how babies need a lot of REM sleep, where animals don't need very much at all. And as we get older, we need less REM sleep, or like as we grow to be adults, we need less REM sleep. But now he's connecting REM sleep and emotions. So theoretical considerations indicate that emotional states have a significant effect on the REM sleep. Emotion and memory are both parts of the old mental equipment, and it is probable that an increase in emotional activity has the same effect on the sleep requirements as more use of the memory. This will have the effect of decreasing the need for REM sleep and may explain some of the results of drugs and other agencies that affect the emotions. It may also explain why the deprivation of REM sleep under experimental conditions can be carried far beyond what seems to be the normal limit. To lead one expert to say, although there is a need for REM sleep, apparently it is not absolute. The REM sleep deprived individuals, both human and animal, are reported to exhibit undue brain excitement, which may very well be the result of a forced increase in emotional and memory functions to offset the loss of REM sleep time. During the REM period, when the individual is asleep, that is, his thinking mechanism is out of service, but his memory is still active. Both memory mechanisms, which are circulating memory and storage memory, are operating normally, but have been disconnected from the motor control. And the inflow of sensory stimuli from the environment is almost totally shut off. In the absence of thought and environmental input, the memory apparatus responds only to stimuli from the circulating memory and from internal sensations. If the originating stimulus is physiological, it usually consists of what we may call a theme. Hunger, for example, without details. As brought out earlier, such abstract themes are not the kind of input with which the memory storage processes are equipped to deal. In order to fit into these processes, the themes must be put into the form of experiences. Memories that are associated with hunger that are already present in storage are therefore drawn upon, and a synthetic hunger experience is built up. The individual becomes aware of this synthetic experience in a manner similar to that which he becomes aware of real experiences and with certain qualifications we will consider later, it appears to him that he's undergoing a real experience. This process is a dream. So a dream is when memories that just really contain a theme have to be basically translated into a form of experience, because that is the that is the kind of input with which the memory storage processes are equipped to deal. So in order to fit into these processes, the themes must be put into the form of experiences, and that's a dream. The second and most prolific source of dream stimuli is the circulating memory system. And the circulating memory system is basically the reminding function that it's telling you have a meeting at 4 o'clock. You have to pick up your kids at 4:30. It's reminding you that these things are happening so that you don't become absent-minded, even though you may be trying to think. You're sitting at work and you're trying to think, but you have every once in a while your mind comes around to reminding you that, oh yeah, in half an hour I've got to go pick up my kids or whatever. This process is the system continues to bring one after another of the items that it contains into the position where it makes contact with both the memory storage and the thinking mechanism, which is inactive in this REM sleep. The same process is also in operation during the waking state, but is subject to suppression by the thinking mechanism, which serves as a sensor, and in any event is overshadowed by the much greater flow of direct experiences to the memory storage. As each of the items in the circulating memory makes the appropriate contact, it acts in the same manner as a physiological stimulus. That is, it initiates a dream. These items from the circulating memory system contain only a minimum of detail, as the functions of this system do not require a detailed elaboration. In fact, an excessive amount of detail would interfere with the primary purpose of this memory system, the reminding function. So like the sensory stimuli, the circulating memories are mainly in the form of abstract themes, although there is a certain amount of elaboration by means of which might be called subsidiary themes. In a sense, the content of the circulating memories is intermediate between that of the physiological sensations, which are simply hunger, cold, etc., and the detailed memories of experience that go into the memory storage. We may compare the circulating memory to a language with a limited vocabulary, and the detailed memory of the original experience to a versatile modern language such as English. In the principal memory process, the full account of the experience goes directly into storage. Meanwhile, this account is translated into the limited language of the circulating memory for its purposes. During sleep, when no direct accounts of experience are coming in, the memories of the circulating system are fed one by one into the stream going to storage and are translated back into the detailed form that is acceptable to the storage facilities. A consideration of the language analogy shows what results can be expected. If a statement made in English is translated into the language of some primitive tribe and then retranslated back into English by some person who does not have access to the original text, the general idea of the statement will be preserved, but there will undoubtedly be significant differences in the details. Similarly, a dream produced by a circulating memory theme will reproduce the theme of the source from which the memory originated, but may alter the details beyond recognition. There's also a fairly good chance that the details will be reproduced accurately in a certain percentage of the dreams. A memory of the original experience exists in the memory storage, and since this is usually, perhaps always, a very recent acquisition, it is favorably suited for recall. Thus, the association process may very well reach this memory rather than some other item in storage, and in that case, the result will be that the dream reproduces the original experience with no more than minor variations. Okay, now he's going to get into a little bit more theoretical stuff on dreaming. There has been much discussion of what has been interpreted as a need to dream. Freud called it a safety valve which relieves the mind of harmful material. Our findings are that what exists is a need for sleep in order to synchronize the processes of the mind with the structure of the brain. Again, he is referring to the mind as a sector 2 thing and the brain as a sector 1 thing. So we're synchronizing the processes of the mind with the structure of the brain, and a further need to separate the memory from the thinking mechanism during a portion of the synchronization process in order to allow the thinking mechanism to continue the adjustment process for a time after the synchronization of the memory is complete. Thus, the only need for anything other than the sleep itself is for the correct proportion of REM sleep to total sleep. The dreams occur not because they are needed, but because they are part of the normal physiological